The Texas sun beat down mercilessly as I stood at the edge of our property, watching dust devils dance across what my father-in-law had just called worthless desert land. 500 acres of dry earth, scrub brush, and family history stretched out before me. This land had been in my wife Anna's maternal family for 3 generations, passed down from her grandmother who had held onto it through drought, depression, and personal tragedy. What are we even going to do with it, Mike? Anna's voice was thick with disappointment as she joined me at the property line. She just endured another brutal family dinner where her father, Richard Sterling, had made his opinions crystal clear. I could still hear his booming voice. While I'm dividing up the family assets, I'm doing you both a favor by giving the prime commercial properties to your brother Thomas. At least he knows how to manage real estate. You two can have your mother's old desert plot. Maybe you can raise cacti. The laughter around the dinner table had been painful. Thomas, with his MBA and real estate empire, had smirked behind his wine glass. Even Anna's mother had given us that pitying look that wealthy people reserve for poor financial decisions. But they didn't know what I knew. They hadn't spent the last 6 months studying geological surveys and historical land records. They hadn't noticed the subtle changes in the landscape that had caught my attention during our monthly visits to check on the property. We're going to be patient, I told Anna, squeezing her hand. That's what we're going to do. I'm Mike Anderson, a geological engineer by training, though I'd spent the last 5 years teaching high school science to be closer to home after Anna's mother got sick. It wasn't the prestigious career her family had hoped their daughter would marry into, but it had given me something they didn't have: time to study, to observe, to understand the land beneath our feet. The property had been a source of family tension long before we inherited it. Sarah Martinez, Anna's grandmother, had refused numerous offers to sell over the years, including several that would have made her a millionaire. The land has secrets, she used to say. You just have to be patient enough to learn them. I'd taken those words to heart, spending my weekends and summers exploring every inch of the property. I'd noticed things, subtle changes in soil composition, unusual geological formations, the way certain plants thrived in particular areas. But it was the water in the old well that finally confirmed my suspicions. Remember what your grandmother used to say about the land? I asked Anna as we walked back to our truck. That it has secrets? Anna smiled sadly. Mom used to think Grandma was just being stubborn, holding onto this place when they could have sold it and lived comfortably in the city. Your grandmother knew something, I said, pulling out my tablet. And I think I figured out what it was. 2 weeks earlier, I'd sent water and soil samples to a private laboratory under a confidential contract. The results had come in this morning, just hours before the family dinner where Richard had so eloquently dismissed our inheritance. What's this? Anna asked, looking at the complex chemical analysis on the screen. Evidence, I replied, of something your grandmother suspected but never had the technology to prove. I pointed to several key indicators in the results. See these hydrocarbon signatures, the mineral composition, the underground water patterns. Anna frowned, trying to make sense of the technical data. What does it mean? It means, I said carefully, that your grandmother's desert might be sitting on top of one of the largest untapped oil reserves in West Texas. The revelation didn't sink in immediately. Anna stared at me, then at the tablet, then at the seemingly barren land around us. Oil? Already sure. Sure enough to have already sent the preliminary data to 3 independent geological survey companies. I checked my watch. They should be contacting us soon to arrange full surveys. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Marathon Oil's Exploration Division wanted to schedule a meeting. Don't tell your family yet, I advised, showing her the email. Let's wait until we have all the surveys done and the mineral rights confirmed. Anna nodded slowly, a smile starting to replace her earlier despair. Is this why you've been so calm about Dad's comments? About Thomas getting all the good properties? Partly, I admitted. But mostly I was just respecting your grandmother's wisdom. She knew this land had value. She just needed someone patient enough to find it. The next few weeks were a blur of activity, all conducted under strict confidentiality agreements. Survey teams came and went, their equipment far more sophisticated than my amateur investigations. Each new test confirmed what I had suspected. We were sitting on a massive oil field, previously undetected because it lay deeper than most traditional surveys would have checked. Through it all, we maintained our normal routine. I taught my physics classes, Anna continued her work as a pediatric nurse, and we endured the weekly family dinners where Thomas bragged about his latest real estate acquisitions. You really should consider selling that desert plot, Richard said during one such dinner, about a month after our inheritance. Thomas knows some developers who might take it off your hands, for a reasonable price, of course. Thomas leaned forward, all corporate concern. I could probably get you $50,000 for it. That's more than fair for unproductive land. I felt Anna tense beside me, but she maintained her composure. We practiced for this moment. That's a generous offer, I said carefully, but I think we'll hold on to it for now. Sarah believed in that land. We owe it to her memory to give it a chance. Richard scoffed. Sarah was a stubborn old woman who didn't know when to let go. Just like you two, apparently. Maybe, Anna replied, her voice steady. Or maybe she knew something you don't, Dad. The conversation moved on, but I caught Thomas watching us thoughtfully. He hadn't built his real estate empire by ignoring subtle hints. I made a mental note to fast-track our pending deals. That night, as Anna and I reviewed the latest survey results in our modest home office, she asked the question that had been bothering her. Why didn't Grandma Sarah ever investigate this herself? She must have suspected something. I pulled out an old land survey from the 1960s. She did, actually. Look at this. I pointed to some notations in the margins. She commissioned a basic survey, but the technology back then couldn't detect deposits this deep. By the time the technology improved, oil companies weren't exploring this region anymore. They thought it was tapped out. So she just waited, Anna mused. All those years, all those offers to sell, and she just waited. She waited. I agreed. And she made sure the mineral rights stayed with the property. That was crucial. Some of these old deeds split surface rights from mineral rights, but she kept them together. She knew exactly what she was doing. The final confirmation came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of teaching my students about potential energy when my phone buzzed with a message from our lawyer. The geological surveys were complete, the mineral rights were confirmed, and 3 major oil companies were preparing bids for drilling rights. The preliminary valuations made Thomas's $50,000 offer look like pocket change. I finished my lesson on potential energy with a smile, thinking about how perfectly it applied to our situation. Just like in physics, sometimes the most valuable things aren't immediately visible. You have to understand where to look for them. That evening, Anna and I sat on our back porch looking at the stars and considering our next move. We should tell them, Anna said finally. Dad and Thomas, I mean. Before they hear it from someone else. I nodded. The news would break soon anyway. Oil discoveries this size didn't stay secret for long. How do you want to do it? Anna thought for a moment, then smiled. Dad's hosting that big real estate investment dinner next week. The one where Thomas is supposed to announce his new development project. The perfect moment for a different kind of investment announcement? Exactly. She leaned against me, her voice thoughtful. You know what's funny? All these years, they thought Grandma Sarah was foolish for holding onto worthless land, but she was the smartest of them all. I thought about Sarah Martinez, who'd worked this land with quiet determination, who'd passed down not just property but patience, who'd understood that true value isn't always visible on the surface. Your grandmother, I said, knew exactly what she was doing. She just needed someone to come along who could understand the signs she'd seen. As we sat there, planning how to reveal our discovery, I couldn't help but appreciate the elegant justice of it all. Richard had given us what he considered worthless, thinking he was putting us in our place. Instead, he'd handed us the key to something far more valuable than his precious city properties. Sometimes, I reflected, the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about being patient enough to let the truth rise to the surface on its own. The crystal ballroom at the Sterling Hotel gleamed with old money and new ambitions. Richard Sterling's annual real estate investment dinner was the social event of the season for Dallas's property developers, a chance to showcase success and announce new ventures. Anna and I had attended these dinners for years, always seated at the far end of the table, politely ignored. Tonight would be different. Ready? I asked Anna as we walked into the ballroom. She wore her grandmother Sarah's vintage pearl necklace, a quiet tribute to the woman who'd made this evening possible. Ready, she replied, squeezing my hand. In her clutch was a USB drive containing our presentation. geological surveys, oil company bids, and preliminary contracts worth more than all of Richard's prime real estate combined. Thomas spotted us first, making his way over with that characteristic smirk. Didn't expect to see you two here. Dad's announcing my new development project tonight, 30 stories of prime downtown real estate. He'd adjusted his Italian silk tie. Quite a step up from desert scrubland, eh? Congratulations, Anna said smoothly. Actually, we have some development news of our own to share. Thomas's smirk widened. Oh, finally decided to sell that wasteland. Something like that, I replied, enjoying the moment. Though wasteland might not be the most accurate term. Before Thomas could respond, Richard's booming voice called everyone to their seats. The table arrangements told their own story of family hierarchy. Thomas and his wife Jennifer at Richard's right hand, their place cards embossed in gold. Anna and I were tucked away near the kitchen doors. Distinguished guests, Richard began, standing at the head of the table. Tonight is about the future of sterling investments, about recognizing opportunity, about knowing where true value lies. Anna and I exchanged glances. Richard had no idea how prophetic those words would prove. My son Thomas, Richard continued, beaming with pride, has secured the largest development deal in our company's history. The Sterling Tower will redefine the Dallas skyline. The presentation began, complete with architectural renderings and projected revenue figures. $300 million in development costs, with an expected return of $500 million over 10 years. The assembled guests murmured appreciatively. And now Thomas stood, ready for his moment of triumph. I'd like to discuss the investment opportunities. Actually, Anna's voice cut through the room, clear and confident. Before we discuss investments, I think our family has another announcement to make. The silence was immediate. Richard's face darkened. Anna, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, Dad. Anna stood, her grandmother's pearls catching the light. You've spent months telling everyone how worthless our inheritance is. I think they deserve to know the truth. I connected our USB drive to the presentation system. The architectural renderings of Thomas's tower disappeared, replaced by geological surveys and test results. What you're looking at, I said, standing beside my wife, is the preliminary survey of the Martinez property, what you've all been calling worthless desert land. These red zones indicate oil deposits, not surface deposits, but deep reserves that were undetectable until recent technological advances. The room erupted in whispers. Richard's face had gone from red to white. According to 3 independent surveys, Anna continued, we're sitting on one of the largest untapped oil fields in West Texas. Marathon Oil's initial bid for drilling rights alone is worth $850 million. Thomas's wine glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one noticed. But that's just the starting point, I added, switching to the next slide. The estimated total value of the recoverable oil using current market prices. I paused, letting the number sink in. $4 billion. Richard Sterling, for the first time in his life, was speechless. Of course, Anna said, her voice carrying just a hint of steel. This is just worthless desert land. So if anyone's interested in making an offer, say $50,000, she looked directly at Thomas. We're happy to consider it. The next hour was chaos. Investment bankers who'd come to discuss Thomas's tower project suddenly discovered urgent interest in oil exploration. Real estate developers who dismiss our worthless inheritance now crowded around, business cards at the ready. Through it all, I watched Richard. He sat in his chair, looking somehow smaller, as the empire he built on prime real estate was dwarfed by the fortune his despised desert land had revealed. How long have you known? Thomas finally asked, cornering us by the dessert table. Long enough, I replied. Your sister's grandmother wasn't just being stubborn when she refused to sell. She knew this land had value. She just needed someone patient enough to find it. Dad's going to have a heart attack, Thomas muttered, but there was something like respect in his voice now. Dad's going to have to accept that his judgment isn't always perfect, Anna said firmly, and that value isn't always visible from a downtown office. The aftermath of that dinner changed more than just our financial status. The family dynamics shifted like tectonic plates, revealing new formations of respect and understanding. Richard, after a week of stunned silence, attempted to advise us on managing our newfound wealth. Anna's response was polite but firm. Thanks, Dad, but we've got this. After all, we managed to find a $4 billion oil field while you weren't looking. We didn't go crazy with the money. The first thing we did was establish a scholarship fund in Sarah Martinez's name, focusing on geological engineering students from rural communities. I kept teaching high school science, though now I had a fully equipped lab and could fund field trips that brought geology to life for my students. And I continued her nursing work but established a foundation to support rural healthcare initiatives. Grandma Sarah always said the land would provide, she told me. She didn't just mean for us. The oil field development proceeded carefully with strict environmental safeguards. We made sure local communities benefited from the prosperity, just as Sarah would have wanted. The land she protected for so long was finally revealing its gifts, but on its own terms. Thomas's Sterling Tower was eventually built, though with considerably less fanfare than originally planned. He's different now, more thoughtful, less quick to judge value solely by surface appearances. He even asked my opinion on some property investments recently, though I suspect that was harder for him than he let on. Richard took longer to adjust. The man who'd built his life on knowing the real value of things struggled to accept that he'd so completely misread this situation. But time, and the undeniable success of our ventures, gradually softened his stance. Last month, at a family dinner now held at a local steakhouse rather than his formal dining room, he actually admitted he might have been hasty in his judgment. "Sarah," he said, studying his whiskey, "she knew, didn't she? All those years, she knew what that land was worth. She knew it had value," Anna corrected gently. "The oil was just one form of it. She valued the history, the connection to the land, the patience it taught us. The money's nice, Dad, but it's not the only measure of worth. I often think about that concept when I'm teaching my students about potential energy. Sometimes I tell them, the most valuable things are hidden beneath the surface. You just have to know how to look for them, and be patient enough to wait for them to reveal themselves." We still have the original deed to the property, framed alongside Sarah's photograph in our study. Below it, we've added a quote from one of her old letters. "The land has secrets. Patient hearts will find them." The Texas sun still beats down on our property, but now oil derricks rise alongside the native plants we've carefully preserved. It's a different kind of harvest than Sarah Martinez might have imagined, but I like to think she'd approve of how we've managed her legacy. After all, she taught us the most valuable lesson of all. True worth isn't always visible to those too busy looking at surface appearances. Sometimes it requires a deeper understanding, a patient heart, and the wisdom to know that the best revenge isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. As I write this from our ranch house, modest compared to what we could afford, but perfect for our needs, I can see the lights of the oil field twinkling in the distance. They remind me of stars scattered across the desert night, each one a testament to Sarah's faith in the land and its secrets. Thomas's Sterling Tower rises in the distant city skyline, a monument to traditional ideas of success. But out here, under the vast Texas sky, we found a different kind of success. One built on patience, understanding, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that true value, like oil, often lies far beneath the surface. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, it rises up all on its own.